Hello, everyone, and welcome on into OneSoccer.ca. Andy Petrillo, Oliver Platt, Gareth Wheeler with you. And gentlemen, some news that we got today was that the June 5th friendly against Iran has officially been canceled by Canada Soccer. No more was said on that, except that it was canceled. And as we know, this was controversial almost from the get-go. Once it was announced, you started to hear of the families who were affected by the flight that was shot down by the Iranian military, killing 85 Canadians on board. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked about it, and he set off a firestorm by saying he didn't think it was a very good idea that this was happening, prompting Canada Soccer to put out their own statement saying they believe sport can bring people together, and going on to say that the decision behind Iran was strictly a preparation for World Cup decision. And this is a team that's ranked 21st in the world and will be going to the World Cup. And it was all about Canada preparing themselves as best as they can to perform on that stage where they will be for the first time since 1986. But the families of the victims continue to pressure, as we know, continue to share their stories, which were very, heart-wrenching to hear those stories. They've been planning protests in Vancouver. The Vancouver mayor had also called for the cancellation of this game, gentlemen. So it is official. Ollie, are you surprised, though, that it has officially been canceled, given, the FIFA window where Canada will play 3 games, that being their only friendly? Or do you think it was the only choice they could make?
I am surprised, I have to say. I wasn't expecting this game to be cancelled, despite all the pressure that was out there. As of just a couple of days ago, really, all the indications I had was that cancelling this game was, an absolute last resort, and would have really negative consequences, obviously, for the team, for Canada Soccer, and they wanted to try and manage the situation in the best way possible and play this match. You can imagine what those negative consequences are going to be. Massive amounts of lost revenue in terms of the gate that was expected at BC Place, the loss of a key preparation match for the World Cup, which is now going to be very, very difficult to replace. All the potential political fallout from this as well. So from what I've heard, and we're just trying to kind of figure this out as it's happening here today, I think that, over the last 24 hours, it sounds like things have really heated up and been very intense. I haven't had a clear answer yet on if there was one thing in particular that made the situation untenable and forced the game to be cancelled. So I think there's probably, if you were to speculate, a couple of things that stand out that have happened over the past day or two, which have been probably, ramping up that pressure, which is, firstly, there was the story about the profit that the Iranian Federation was going to make on this match as a consequence of the match fee they were going to be paid. I think the potential, to have that kind of tangled situation of the Iranian Federation and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and how those things are potentially intermingled in ways that are quite difficult to grasp, but potentially dangerous for Canada Soccer to be involved in that and to be paying money in that direction. And then you also had the Prime Minister come out and say that even if the team were granted visas, they could get to the border and be turned away. So I think there's been a couple of things that have, made this even more treacherous and made it an even more difficult situation to deal with over the past day or two. And, here we are now with obviously the game being cancelled.
Yeah, at the time of taping, we're still gathering information. We're still kind of trying to pinpoint what actually transpired and how it played out. My overwhelming feeling right now, Andy, is one of sadness. Sadness for the families, the people that their lives have been changed forever because of this tragedy. And I don't think that they have closure through the actions of our government. And now this story's come to light in a very difficult way, and it's been very difficult for them. I have sadness for, the Canadian men's national team and the Canadian Soccer Association, who, for tactical reasons, set up this game, right? And didn't break any laws or guidelines. Iran's going to be playing in the World Cup, the 21st ranked nation in the world, a good team. A team that there are intangibles that are like for like, that would help Canada prepare for this World Cup. We already documented it. Canada's playing in a group with Morocco. The US are playing in a group with Iran. The cooperation between the US and Berhalter and Canada and Herdman, like there's actual, real reasons for this game to be played, which would have been a good exercise. There was an appetite from the public to go out and watch this game be played. The game sold out right away. What's crazy to me, maybe crazy is the wrong word, what really transpired here over the last week and a half, after this game was announced 2 weeks ago, for the next 5-6 days, there wasn't a peep. There really was nothing to do other than the fact that tickets are going on sale. People were excited to see Canada back in action, building off the positive momentum that was established during World Cup qualifying. And then our prime minister was asked that question. Didn't sound like he was prepared for it. Yeah. Our prime minister had no problem, being with our men and women's national teams, taking pictures, being a big time supporter of the program, which was amazing. In a time like this, when the prime minister, comes out and says that he disagrees with this game, and then doubles down and then triples down, and then political willpower starts applying pressure to the CSA, to the players, to the personnel, to the volunteers within the organization, putting them in a vulnerable position when they're trying to stage this game. I just feel like the pressure was just too much, and this game just could not go on. I think the players, as was reported elsewhere, they were feeling the pressure from different areas. You documented it, Andy. The city of Vancouver, they were feeling the pressure. There would have been massive pressure on the security to make sure that event could be taken place in a safe way, with widespread protests, being planned. There was pressure on the government, of course, and there should continue to be pressure on the government in order to somehow bring closure to the situation. Just the pressure, I think, is just mounted on everyone involved, making sure that this game just unfortunately, couldn't be played, even though I think that there was good reason for the game to be set up in the first place due to sporting and preparation reasons. So the politics is overwhelmed the sporting nature of this event, and here we are today. It's unfortunate for all parties involved, really.
Just very quickly to add to that, I think obviously Canada Soccer is going to get an enormous amount of criticism here, and they'll have to take a look at, what led to them making this decision and how they can improve those processes in the future. Obviously, that's going to have to happen, but it's really important to say, I think, that they did not spring this game on the Canadian government. They have to notify multiple levels of government when games like this are being arranged and another team is being brought into this country. So that I think is very important to remember, in terms of, the government was aware that this game was going to happen. And it was when the pressure came, when the questions came, that obviously they spoke out against it, but not before that.
Just to build off that, and in the $400,000, it just needs to be said, like, in some people's eyes, like, any kind of money going to the Iranian Federation would have been too much, but that's not a large amount. That basically covers the travel costs, the cost of playing this game. Countries like Brazil, Argentina, England, like the big nations, they'd be charging multi-million dollars as an appearance fee to come play a game in this country. This is just about the lowest fee that any country would command in playing a game like this. So again, to some people, and I completely understand why, any money is too much. But from a sporting perspective, this is not a significant amount of money that's being exchanged, that was supposed to be exchanged in this game. And I don't believe a penny has been given to the Iranian Federation up until this point.
Yeah, this will be a story we're tracking, because of course you can imagine it won't be over behind the scenes, and we're hoping to get more information as the week progresses as well. Like who ultimately decided? Was it a collaboration between Canada Soccer and the federal government, to cancel this, and what led to it? But I think the word you use, sad. We want things to be black or white, this or that, and it's not. Because it is sad. It's sad all around. Obviously, it's sad for these families. You could never get your family members back who were murdered. It's sad that the government does appear to have been dragging their heels for the last couple of years. That might be a harsh on my point, just given the pandemic that they also had to deal with. But that is still something that is ongoing. And then it's sad because Canada Soccer and the players who are over the moon, as well as the fan base, going to a World Cup for the first time since 1986, are strictly thinking about what is best to prepare this team. And Canada Soccer, we have documented when we've talked about John Herdman and possibly leaving to take a head coaching job with a pro team, we've documented the money. He himself has said, knocking on doors, is that we know Canada Soccer does not have that kind of money, Gareth, that you were talking about to go and spend on those types of teams. So you can see how they did their due diligence in sticking within a budget and trying to find a team that worked for them. But of course, these are fresh wounds. This incident, this airplane, this disaster happened in January of 2020. These are very fresh wounds. So I think we can all understand that everything surrounding it is truly completely sad.
Look, and look, again, there's two things that need to be separated here: the sporting side of things and the personal, the political, like the outside human factor here. Like that weighs heavily. Like a lot of the Eustachio plays on the same Porto side as Taremi. Like they're probably looking forward to playing one another. Like I don't like a lot of these Iranian players, reside across the globe, in Germany, in Mexico, and other places, right? Like you can be competitors on the field. Like I watched North Korea play live in Johannesburg at the 2010 World Cup. North Korea has played, I believe, in the women's under 20s in this country. Like there's always going to be, countries where, there's political angst, there's history, things are very personal. We're much more aware of human rights and the plight of that many people in this world unjustly suffer through in this world. And oftentimes we put our foot down. And in this case, I think you said it, Andy, like it still seems so fresh. The voices gathered, they were strong. And when players are being, pressured, not just in an online space, but like, if people are knocking on your door, protesting outside your house, doing these sorts of things, like, man, it puts these players, it puts the staff, it puts everyone in a very vulnerable position. And the safety of our players and everyone else, it comes first and foremost. And again, I just don't think that it was just worth the risk in the end.
No, and the pressure is one thing, but let's also, two wrongs don't make a right. I don't like when I hear about stuff of harassment either. Don't harass members of Canada Soccer. Don't harass players, because again, two wrongs don't make a right. And when you make someone and their family feel unsafe, what's next, Ollie, for Canada Soccer? Again, this is a June window. We know they're taking on Curacao, Honduras in CONCACAF Nations League. Is there a possibility they could fill that June 5th hole?
From what I've been told so far, the possibility is very, very slim. At this late notice, it's going to be very difficult to find an opponent. Obviously, they have the two games. They have now a gap in front of those two games. There's, Iran was supposed to be playing Ecuador in Toronto, but Ecuador have already arranged, that game was cancelled as well. Ecuador have already arranged another game against Cape Verde in the United States, so that one's off the table. Albania maybe could be a possibility. They were another one of the teams that was due to play around in Canada. It's not the kind of opponent that you would be looking for, really, if you're John Herdman at this stage. But if you just want to get a game in, maybe there's something there. The Ukrainian ambassador to Canada has tweeted that Ukraine would be willing to play Canada, which is not possible if Ukraine actually wins their playoff semifinal and has another game to play after that. So I think, again, that one is a long shot. And even if they lose that game, they're playing Ireland, I think, on the 8th of June in UEFA Nations League. So again, I can speculate here as to what they can do. I think the reality is it's going to be very, very difficult to find another opponent in the time frame they have and with the circumstances they have here. So that's a major, major blow for the Canadian men's national team and for John Herdman, right? They have 5 games left before the World Cup. It now looks like it's going to be 4 with those 2 Nations League matches plus the pair of friendlies they'll hope to arrange in September.
I think they might have to get a little creative here. You obviously exhaust all of your resources within FIFA, your connections, to see if you can get a game played. But if not, I'm just spitballing here off the top of my head. Do you not try to call in more Canadian players? Have a glamour inter-squad game. Everyone wants to see more Canadian players called into camp. It is an international window. A lot of these players might be available. Can you get a group of, 30 players in and have a good high level, red and white game? Can you bring in MLS players? Can you bring in CPL players? Like, what can you do? Just because you might not be able to have an official game against an international opponent doesn't mean that you can't have a game where Herdman's, able to kind of manipulate and get his first team together and play against, a good level opponent. I think you need to be creative here. That's kind of what I'm getting after. That, I know it's not ideal, Ollie, but this is where your head goes to in situations like this. How can we make the best of a difficult situation?
Yeah, that was what kind of crossed my mind, was could you even play like a club team? Like the Whitecaps are playing an MLS game that weekend, so that one's kind of scratched off. But that was kind of where my mind wandered to as well. Is just can you get a team to Vancouver, and any team of a decent standard that you can at least play a match against?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have to think creatively, because to your point, you also you want to get out, you want to get moving. Something needs to happen there. But I'm wondering again, if we go big picture, if Gareth, we think that there are ramifications for this, right? Because we touched on this last week when we first addressed this story, and we are more aware of what's going on in other countries. We are aware that as much as you want sport to stay sport, politics will always bleed in here and there, just a little bit. And I even posed the question, if you think sporting federations at some point should start to have a political advisor, just because, again, you look at things through a sports lens. Sometimes you completely forget that X, Y, and Z happened with this country, and it takes somebody to go, by the way, that may not work. But do you think there could be ramifications here for Canada, or is this an isolated incident where FIFA would even FIFA, the big governing body here, would understand that this is something that happened between Iran and Canada, where 85 Canadians were killed?
Look, without speaking to anyone at FIFA, I think they'll understand the circumstances, but I don't think they'll like it. This isn't how they generally operate, right? They believe that, football stands for the greater good, bringing countries together. We saw Canada during World Cup qualifying go down to Haiti at that time, and it was a very dicey situation from a political perspective in that country at that time, right? Countries that are in conflict are generally still play from an international perspective. Russia's going to come back playing at some point, right? The Russian Federation is suspended right now, but they'll come back. North Korea's played in World Cups. The last World Cup was in Russia. This upcoming World Cup is in Qatar. Things have seemed very quiet around this Qatar situation, guys. Do players, and I'm not just speaking about Canadian players, if they feel uncomfortable, playing a game against Iran, how do these players feel about playing in Qatar? A lot.
It's a slippery slope, but you're right. It's a slippery slope, which is why I ask if this is also just strictly isolated because of Canada, Iran, and that plane crash.
I think we're at a different space in sports today, and I don't believe that the responsibility falls to the individual organizations. It's up for the global federation to make these decisions. The International Ice Hockey Federation decided that Russia, Belarus, no, you're out of the upcoming World Juniors. They made that decision. It wasn't Hockey Canada or U.S. Hockey that's making that decision here. We're also supposed to be hosting a World Cup in 2026.
Yeah.
I don't know what the climate is going to be like in 2026. This isn't just a uniquely Canadian problem. This is the United States, Mexico, anyone holding a World Cup. What countries are willing to put the politics of the situation to the side in order to stage a tournament, which, if you've ever been to a World Cup, it really brings everyone together. People that support Iran, not all of them, a lot of people would have loved to have seen their Canadian team, Canada, the country that they live in now, play against the country that they come from. These things are nuanced. It's very difficult, but we could be at a turning point here. We're still 5.5 months out. Our players, and I'm not just speaking about Canadian players, are they going to be pressured by outside sources, I don't know how you can deny yourself the opportunity to play in a World Cup. Olympians had to make that decision in recent Olympics as well, and they decided to compete. Like it puts athletes in an incredibly difficult situation. But the 2026 World Cup, man, like the fact that our prime minister didn't try to publicly support the federation a little bit more and understanding why this game had been played, even when it had to be passed through government sources before, man, like that creates a difficult situation here. These are murky waters. And based upon the temperature and the climate and the way that the political is delved and come not only into the sporting world, but into our personal lives as well, these aren't easy situations to navigate. And I wonder how much things will be influenced going forward. It's not just soccer, by the way. It's hockey tournaments in this country. It's golf tournaments. It's tennis tournaments in this country. Like,
Do you start banning people from coming here? Yeah, like what slope are you sliding down?
where
Yeah.
are we going here? And you brought it, like, is this an isolated incident, or is this a watershed moment here that now when it comes to Canadian sport, we are really going to crack down and regulate which athletes from which countries are allowed to compete within our borders? Are we at that point? I cannot answer that question.
Yeah, I think there are some special circumstances here in the sense that firstly, this is still very fresh and it directly impacted Canadians, right, in terms of what happens with that plane being shot down. And then secondly, I think that there is a feeling among the people who are very much against this game that Canada Soccer could have picked someone else, right? Like, why do you have to play against Iran? And now we can give the reasons from a sporting perspective as to why that decision was made. But I think it's the feeling that there was choice there and that this was a choice to play against Iran is probably something that makes this, a very particular situation. That being said, it's certainly not going to be the only political firecracker that Canada Soccer has to deal with over the next few years, right? Again, the Qatar World Cup is obviously one where there's going to be conversations around that. Hosting the World Cup in 2026 and having countries that probably do things that we don't agree with coming into Canada and competing in that competition is again going to be a situation that has to be handled the right way. So I think you're right, Andy, that like Canada Soccer probably needs to look at this as a lesson that every single decision they make when it comes to dealing with other countries in any context over the next few years, and we are going to see Canada thrust onto the world stage over the next few years, they need someone who knows what he or she is doing and what they're talking about to really be on top of all of this stuff and making sure that they're making educated decisions and not putting their foot in it in a way that can be avoided. Because as much as in some ways this is a little bit isolated, I think it's not the only decision they're going to have to make over the coming years that could have political ramifications and could negatively affect them.
There's a lot of conflict worldwide, and there's a lot of people who seek refuge in our great country to escape for their own livelihood, for their own safety. It's very difficult, like for people in this country not to be affected by world affairs and things that are going on elsewhere. And that can be said for a number of different countries. It's what makes our country great. And it's very, very, very difficult to get 100% of the people on board with every game that you play, right? Like, so football is a global sport. It's not like hockey where there's like 7-8 other countries that you play, much like the Olympics, which you cover so wonderfully, Andy. Like, you're playing against athletes from other sports, and the IOC also tries to stay out of that political stuff. Like, what happened with Peng Shuai, the tennis player, like in the tennis, like, there's just look, I do not have the answers. I wish I did, but this has been a real moment and a real difficult one for Canada Soccer. And it's easy to point fingers and cast blame on everyone. There's no straightforward playbook here. There's no straightforward playbook. It's being written right now.
And that's why I always just go back. We want life to be black or white, and it just simply is not. And, I've gone blue in the face talking about this when it comes to the federation, so the organizing body, right? So be it FIFA, be it UEFA, be it IOC, be it the IIHF that you brought up as well with hockey. When they make decisions, it really does take that pressure off of the local federations to have to make those types of decisions. Now, if the local ones still want to do that, that's up to them. We're even seeing it in tennis, right? The French Open is doing something different than Wimbledon is doing. That's fine. But when you have like the governing bodies, I feel it really kind of starts with them. Again, this Iran thing is an isolated incident with Canada. But when you talk Qatar, I mean, that falls at the feet of FIFA. You have to start being better with who you choose. IOC, you know, when they chose Russia, 2014, ton of controversy there and how they were treating their people, you know, for the Olympics. And then, of course, Beijing. That's on the IOC. You have to stop putting federations. You have to stop putting athletes in these horrible predicaments. And you have to do a better job at choosing the countries so then we're not even in this type of position to begin with. Again, Canada taking on Iran, friendly, isolated incident. Yes, that's something that Canada Soccer and the government need to figure out themselves. But from a Qatar perspective, man, that falls at the feet of FIFA, right? Moving forward needs to be better because to your point, we live in a different world now where we are connected. We know what's going on in other countries, and it is just unacceptable.
Yeah, and just while we're on FIFA quickly, like in the past, they have not looked kindly at all on countries where they have felt that government influence or interference is having a role in soccer decisions and affecting the federation. That's something that I think we're going to have to, you know, we're going to have to see if they take a look at this or if they involve themselves in this in any way over the next few weeks, because it wouldn't be unprecedented for them to do so. As I said, they tend to not look very kindly, and you can agree or disagree with that, and sometimes it has been controversial. But they do not like to see government, you know, perceived government influence on the decisions of a national association.
Yeah, just on that, thankfully for Canada, there's a Canadian with a big voice in FIFA. The vice president is Victor Montagliani. Canada has been very good in the eyes of FIFA. We staged the most successful Women's World Cup up until that point in 2015. More ticket. It was a massive success for FIFA at a time where the women's game was still kind of trying to find their foothold. Like there wasn't a whole lot of competition to stage that World Cup, right? And Canada did so. And since then, the women's game is just rightfully so, just absolutely taken off and increased in popularity. And Canada deserves a lot of credit in terms of that. Like Canada representatives have been, you know, site administrators over the course of World Cups, and they've been held in high regard. So there is a track record. There is a trust that Canada is in good stead in the eyes of FIFA. Again, I kind of feel like this will be an isolated incident, but I think it's going to be a good teachable, a good learning for both the federation as well as our association and everyone involved about kind of some of the processes behind these decisions that are made and how they go about making them.
I'll say this as someone who truly wants sport to just be sport as well. I get all that. But I can also understand how sometimes you have to be very careful of sport washing. And you're right, Ollie. I can see how, I mean, FIFA, why would you want a government to get involved in sport? Like at some point there has to be separation. At some point sport has to bring people together, which it does. But I will say this. Again, sometimes they choose countries where the government is very much involved with their sport team. I mean, if we're also going to talk about Iran, that's been the biggest topic, is the fact that it's the Iranian Guard has their hands all over this team. That's been the biggest concern with the fact. So it's kind of like everyone's talking this way and that way and pointing this and this, right? Like that's why it's just not that easy to dissect either. And a lot of people talk out of left and right mouth, right?
For sure. And I don't mean to say for a second that FIFA is any great moral arbiter on this. I'm just saying that this has happened before, right?
Yeah.
You know, they do have policies where they don't like to see governments get involved in this kind of stuff.
Well, what we do know is June 16th, we're going to also get a big announcement, right? Which cities are going to be hosting certain World Cup games in 2026. Vancouver is in the running for that. Vancouver mayor calling for the cancellation of this game, you know, which does happen. I don't know. We don't know. We'll see what happens on June 16th when that announcement is made. Gentlemen, this is not an easy topic. I know that we'll probably be covering it for a few weeks to come as more information starts to come out. Players, maybe if they start saying stuff, coaches, we don't know. But I know to a lot of people, there is absolute relief that the game has been canceled. For others, there is just a sadness and a disappointment that, you know, they just want to support their team and they really truly wanted to look at it from a sporting lens. But thus the world we live in, not that easy. And gentlemen, we will get next week probably more into this. We'll get into the Canadian Championship as they're entering the semifinals. There will be a lot to discuss in the world of soccer, as always, here on OneSoccer.ca.